Hello, this is Michelle, and we are officially on our last week of Addie. So, this week, of course, is the evaluation phase of Addie. I think this one is the most interesting to me in the way that while it's at the end of the acronym, it is in no way only happening at the end of a project. Um, so, the first slide I have is just sort of the tasks and outputs that were described in the Developing E-Content package article. I like this article. I've used it a few times throughout the different stages because, excuse me, I feel like it really kind of puts into physical perspective what the tasks you're going to be doing during that phase are. So for evaluation, you might be recording time data, looking at test results, surveys, revising activities, because the output is really that recommendations and reports and working on prototypes. So evaluation I find really interesting because it really does make the process more cyclical. It's not just a one and done. The expectation is that there's growth within the project. So I sort of noticed that throughout the articles, there were three kind of types of evaluation. The first is a formative evaluation. So, this quote from Wang and Wilcox says the purpose of formative evaluation is to identify weakness in instructional materials, methods, or learning objectives with the intention to develop prescribed solutions during training program design and development. And that piece was a quote from Brown and Girdhart within the Wang and Wilcox article. And I thought that was really interesting because this is really where that having evaluation at the end only would never work. As a teacher, this kind of formative assessment and the second type of evaluation, which is on the next slide, which was operational evaluation, which is really focused on the implementation phase and evaluating the materials during that implementation and instruction to update, revise at the time. These two phases of evaluation, I think, are really key to improving and understanding the limits or flaws of a developed lesson. Because if you only look at the end results and you're only looking at what the students' output was, you're missing all the nuances that are involved with instruction. So during the process of instructing and evaluating as you're creating, as you're analyzing, and the whole process leads to higher quality instruction later down the line. So that when you get to that third form of evaluation, the summative evaluation, excuse me if I called that first one summative as well. I meant formative. So you have formative and operational at the beginning and throughout the entire process from, the beginning of Addie to the end of Addie. And the very, very end, of course, is that summative evaluation where you're looking at it's all done, the lesson has been taught, and you're really reconstructing, taking all those pieces, taking all the evaluation you've been doing throughout, and saying, okay, how can we improve or how can we change? A summative evaluation really kind of, as it says, is a judgment or conclusion through measurement and assessment of program outcomes. So this is where you're saying, like, we've collected our surveys, we've collected our test results. Did it work? So not necessarily, do we need to fix that typo or is this context wrong? But just, is this worth doing? And big picture issues. And that can be really tough because throughout the process, you're having these micro sort of evaluation process and you're focused in on the detail, whereas the summative is back to that big picture of like overall, how did it go? What do we need to change? How can we improve? I like this quote from Peterson that said the evaluation phase can often be overlooked because of time or economic factors. However, it is a necessary practice. The evaluation phase should be an integral part of the continuation of analysis and effective implementation of future courses and programs. I wholeheartedly agree with this quote. I think a lot of times, especially with that summative evaluation, you've spent all this time creating this program and implementing it and doing these micro evaluations throughout, that sometimes you're just burnt out, even that you don't really have the time because you need to start looking at the next thing, and that big picture end of the game evaluation gets lost, and then the program never really improves, right? It sort of is what it is, which may be all right, but spending and devoting yourself to really taking the time at the end of something to see how you can improve it will benefit the next group exponentially. And that can be really hard, right? So my definition of evaluation is that is an ongoing process during the first four phases of ADDIE. This evaluation allows for micro fixes for issues during the process. So that, when I'm speaking of that definition of evaluation, I am speaking to that operational and formative evaluation. These are for those micro fixes at the beginning. Evaluation at the end of the unit, so the summative evaluation, lets the team or designer know major issues or flaws that need to be fixed. This lets them reflect on changes to the materials or instruction and make larger, more permanent changes. So I broke my definition into two pieces because I feel like evaluation has sort of two steps to it. There's, like I said, the summative evaluation that happens at the end, and then the formative and operational evaluation that's happening throughout the entire course of the project. And evaluation is incredibly important to the process of creating lessons because it forces designers to see the project as continuous, something that is never fully complete, and allows for growth and improvement over the course of instruction and the unit overall. When we start thinking of projects as starting on this day, ending on this day, step away, leave it, never to be spoken of again. From maybe a more corporate standpoint, at some point, obviously, you would have to do that because the funds end at some point, I'm sure. But from a teacher standpoint, if you're in a classroom, it feels the same way, right? That your unit is over, you need to move on, you're done. But taking the time to evaluate how it went and figure out what you could change will only improve your experience for your next students and even improve the experience of the next unit. What do you need to repeat, take away, continue? What went well? What strategies can you use later on? So we're at the end of ADDIE, but as we know from the evaluation phase, there really is no end. This is an ongoing, ever constant process. So I am positive I will be thinking about ADDIE for a long time as I figure out how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich the rest of the weekend. All right, I'll talk to you later.